Hello. Hi, everyone. Can everybody hear me okay so far? All right, great. This is the first time that I've used the waiting room function in Zoom. It's very exciting.
Very official.
Yeah. I'm going to change my name so that I'm not my mom. Right. There we go. All right, we got a few more people coming in the waiting room. We're going to actually plan to start at here in Austin time 8:02, so that people have a minute to join, and then we'll go through it and see who arrives.
Shout out to Amal. What's going on, madam?
Hey, how are you?
I'm doing great. How about yourself?
Good, thank you.
All right, bringing people together. So everybody knows this training is going to be recorded, so there will be available to share with people later. We're also going to be probably doing another Zoom training next week, maybe on Tuesday or Wednesday, that will cover a few other things besides the projection. But just so everybody knows, if you have friends or people that you'd like to work with, that there's going to be more training materials available. And if they weren't able to make it tonight, there will be more to come.
Great. How'd you guys get the idea to do this?
That will be part of the training, but the beginning was we had started with the memorial collecting stories in March, just because we kind of got the instinct that people needed to be collecting it, that there just needed to be something. A lot of people were going through really profound loss, and there needed to be someone to sort of be there and try and help make sense of that. And then as we were going, sort of realized we were drowning in posts. There was so much internet content coming out about coronavirus. It was easy to get overwhelmed, and thought that bringing the stories out into the real world, into with the projections, was a powerful way to kind of give them more weight and give people, kind of way to more deeply connect with what was happening. So that's the basic short version.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I can't believe some people are still thinking that it's a hoax and not real.
It's pretty shocking. It's pretty shocking. So I said we would start at 8:02, and the last person I knew who was confirmed, who was definitely going to come, just joined. So I'm going to start with the screen share. So basically the format is I've done a whole presentation, basically a PowerPoint, that sort of lays out some of the basic principles of what we're going to be doing, of how to sort of run a projection. There'll be chances to stop and ask questions as we go, and then there will be kind of a final chat about it moment at the end. And so just to start, let me get this fired up. Present view.
Can I make a quick suggestion, Duncan?
Please.
Before we all dive into the presentation, I would say let's do a quick 15-second intro. Who you are, why you're on this call, and where you are.
Oh yeah, on the agenda. Don't worry.
Oh, my bad. Okay, good.
I got you.
I got ahead of myself.
That's all right. Share screen. That's what I want to do. Okay, that's the share screen. Okay. Can everybody see a black page that says welcome on it?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So I wanted to start with a welcome and specifically taking a minute to welcome people who are coming to this training and to the memorial from all the different parts of the coronavirus crisis, essentially. Different places that have been affected in different ways, different families and different neighborhoods that have been affected differently. So I specifically wanted to welcome people if you are grieving a family member, if you're grieving a father, a mother, grandmother, aunt, uncle, want to specifically extend that welcome. Maybe a sibling. If you are grieving members of a found family, people that you may not be related to by birth, but you consider your family, I wanted to welcome you if you're feeling that right now. I wanted to welcome you if you're grieving a friend, a coworker, a neighbor. I specifically wanted to welcome you also if you're just mourning the loss of life, the loss of knowledge in your community and in our country. I wanted to welcome you. And I just wanted to recognize that people are coming to this from many different perspectives and many different experiences, but there's room for all of us here. And the fact that you're here trying to play a role in memorializing this crisis and remembering means that you're in the right place. So just wanted to welcome people from all those different places. And to start, I just called this the roll call. If everybody wants to take a moment to I'll actually call on you in the Zoom so that we don't have to have the awkward pauses where everybody decides who's speaking next. So I will start because I realized I hadn't introduced myself directly. My name is Duncan. I'm one of the co-founders of the COVID Memorial. I live in Austin, Texas. I'm right now in my childhood bedroom in my parents' house where I've been staying for the course of the memorial or course of the pandemic. And my gender pronouns that I use are he and him. So just if that's, if you could add that to your introduction, that would be great. So I'm going to call next on Aaron.
Hey everybody, Aaron Hostetler, also coming to you from Austin, Texas. I've been helping out with the COVID Memorial for about a month now. And for me, it seems like a relatively low lift of a way that we can make a major impact on a community that needs it right now. And so that's why I am here, and he and him also for myself.
And the next person in my Zoom is Amal.
Hi, my name is Amal Scott. I'm originally from England, but I live in Detroit, Michigan right now. I work in the same company as Aaron, so he hopped on my meeting today and inspired me to come today. I just thought it was a really cool way to bring everyone together at a time like this, so that's why I'm here today, and she and her.
Great, and then Laurie, I have you next in my Zoom.
Hi, my name is Laurie Woodward Garcia. I go by she, her, hers. I'm a pissed off mom trying to affect change in my community. I'm in the Fort Lauderdale, Miami area.
Terrific. Teresa, I had you next.
Thanks. I'm Teresa. I live in central New York. When the pandemic started, I was on an around the world trip, so I've seen it in many countries. I'm not currently grieving personally, but I'd like to help those who are. That's why I'm here. And my pronouns are she and her.
Thank you. Joe, I had you next.
I am Joe Schmidt. I'm in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where the virus has deeply affected our African American and Latino neighborhoods. I don't do pronouns. I don't believe in labels, sorry. I'm here because I just wanted to see what it was about and how I might become involved.
Great. Patty.
Hi, everyone. I'm Patty Newberry. I live in Cincinnati, Ohio. I teach journalism at a university here. And I have no direct connection to anyone who has contracted the virus nor died from the virus. But I've been watching it, and I have been tracking it and writing about it. And in fact, I wrote a piece today that I submitted to our local newspaper about grief. And I happened upon your site, Duncan, as I was, researching. And it seems to me a really smart idea that we start to acknowledge this great national grief that we are all carrying around, whether we are directly affected or not. Thanks.
Exactly.
She and her. Yeah.
Cool. Catherine, I had you next.
Hi, all. My name is Catherine. I am in Washington, D.C. Pronouns are she, her. I don't know how I came to this. Duncan, I think I actually know your partner. That might be how I came to it, but I grew up in New York, and my family's still there. And so, while DC is certainly affected, I'm also experiencing some of it through the lens of folks who are living in a much more sort of extreme experience of this, and who certainly are falling ill, and many of whom are passing. So I think I've been following the account on Instagram for many weeks, and was very moved to see this, and thought it was a great idea to do something more, public.
Great. And then Greg, you are last.
Hi, folks. Sorry, I don't have video here. Duncan, I tried to join through a different way, and I'm in the waiting room. But here's my voice. I'm Greg. I'm calling from Miami Beach, which is my hometown. I think Joe is also from South Florida. So I'm looking forward to seeing if there's paths that can cross here. I also don't have any connection down here in Miami to anyone who has passed, which is, given how many people I know in New York City and San Francisco and elsewhere who've contracted the disease and who are themselves in mourning, it's a very odd feeling. But I feel like this is really important to be able to create this space. And so I'm looking forward to helping with it. And I have some questions about how the right way to do it might be. And so I'm looking forward to this conversation. Thank you. Oh, and my pronouns are he and him.
Great. Thank you, everyone, for that. Good to see that we're getting great connections from across the country and some people in the same place. And so to take the big step back, so I wanted to just share sort of where I'm coming from about this. And we chatted about this sort of before everybody had come in, but just to start with a little personal story about me, I helped start the memorial as just an online project in March. And I decided to try and do a projection for the first time in late April with Erin. And the reason was I thought we needed to find other ways to share the stories that were being collected about people who have lost someone. And it wasn't just enough to put them on the internet, because there was so much other content on the internet. There was daily, it's just a flood of memes and posts, and it was just overwhelming. And I really wanted these stories to be unavoidable, because it felt like so many people were trying to avoid the truth. And so when I first started planning a projection, my first reaction was, okay, great, you get a projector, you point it at the wall, no problem, this is easy. And then I started to think about the details. And when I started to think about the details, there were just a lot with power and light and da-da-da-da-da-da. And so, I'd already committed myself. And so I just kind of kept going. And there was, what else do you do in a pandemic? So I called two friends, my friend Satvik and Erin. And we powered through it together, basically. We figured out the details as we went. We did some scouting. We committed to do something before we decided where we were going to do it, which wasn't a great plan. And we didn't figure out the details until later. But at the end, I realized it was actually possible. And there were things that we could do to make this a lot easier if we could share them ahead of time. And so that's the origin of this training and why we're doing this, because we wanted to offer it to maybe make this planning process a little better for everybody else. So the core of what we're going to be talking about is the 3 L's of projection. And so the first L is location. And we're going to go through each of these in order. This is not the only time you'll see this slide. So location, lighting, and electricity. I couldn't figure out a third L, so we're doing electricity. These are the 3 things that determine your event, that shape what makes a projection effective. And so just before we jump in, I just wanted to pause briefly for questions, and then we'll go through the 3 L's. All right. No need. We're just getting started, so there's more time for questions later. Oh, Aaron has one. Okay.
Less of a question and just more of a quick comment. And just for those who are on the call who may be curious about it, the majority of this discussion today, again, like Duncan said, is going to be on how to do specifically of the projection side of the memorial. And then at the end, we're actually going to go through some ideas on if for whatever reason that's not feasible for you, on other ways that you can join it. I just want to let you guys know that that'll be at the end as well.
Great. So the first L is location. And the 2 essential things for your location is you need a flat, blank surface. And so this is a picture from Austin, the first one we did. It's the side of an AT&T building. It happened to be right next to the governor's mansion. So the walls have to be blank. Having a wall with windows or architectural elements or design elements really doesn't, it's very, your text and the images you're projecting become distorted very quickly. So the first place we wanted to project actually was on the side of this hotel. When I hadn't been there in a while, I went down to the hotel and I realized there was a mural painted on it now. It wasn't white anymore. So it wasn't blank. And then the other thing is it has to be very flat. So some people sometimes think about projecting onto a sheet, and it really doesn't work very well. If you've ever walked up to a movie screen or been near a movie screen, it's almost like a trampoline. You could bounce a quarter off it. You want something that's very flat. And so the second thing, so those are the 2 most essential facts of what you need for a location: flat, blank. The other thing to think about is where you project tells a story. The first place that we did it was right by the governor's mansion in Texas. There's this huge wall, and the idea that the governor could be in the governor's mansion and seeing it meant that we could tell a stronger story about what we're doing, and it sent a different kind of message. One of the people who I go to a lot who's been doing projections with this in DC, his name is Robin Bell. The location that he does his projections is he's done them right at the Trump Hotel, and it sends a very clear message about what he's trying to say. He can tell a different story based on where he is, and so the location can tell part of the story. So that's the other thing I wanted to say: flat, blank, and think about your location as one storytelling device. The other key thing to remember is throw ratio. And this is a very complicated way of saying how much space you need. And so the throw ratio is a number that expresses how far back you have to move to get 1 foot of width on the screen. So every projector will have a throw ratio. You can look it up and it'll be included in the materials for the projector you use. And so the projector that we've used in Austin has a throw ratio of 2, which means we have to be 2 feet back in order to get 1 foot wide. If the throw ratio is 0.5, which is a very short throw ratio, you have to go half a foot back in order to get 1 foot wide. So you can see an image here from the second projection we did, and you can see it's taking up that entire wall of the building. And so this was a much more difficult project because we couldn't get right up to that wall. We were about 150 feet away, but we measured that the wall was about 75 feet wide. And so we knew that it would work. So as you're thinking about location, just remember the throw ratio as being the thing that determines how wide your image is going to be. And if you want to take up the entire wall, how far back you need to be from the wall in order to put your image up there. So are there any questions about throw ratio or the kinds of surfaces you need to look for?
I guess I have a question. I'm not that projector savvy. Are there distances where the image starts to get really diluted or it's not bright enough?
Yeah, so we're going to cover that a little bit in the lighting section because that's really determined by the power of your projector.
Okay.
determined by how much brightness you can put out. You know, you can see in this photo here that this is very, very dark. And that's
Mhm.
because we were really pushing it with the distance. Like we were further away than is close to ideal for this projector. And so you can see the people are a little blurry there in Aaron's photo. That's because he had to take a long exposure shot. It wasn't very bright. So yes,
Got
that's
it.
the other thing you need to consider is that just to give you a little preview, most of the time you want to be about 50 feet away.
Thanks.
Great. Any other questions about the kinds of surfaces to look for? Cool. So the two ways that you can think about telling a story with location. What is it and who sees it? So we did two different examples of this in Austin. The first time we did a projection was by the governor's mansion. And the story we were trying to tell was shaped by what we were projecting on. And then the second way to think of it is who sees it. So the second projection we did was down by Lake Austin, where a lot of people are hanging out at night and they're walking around, and a lot of people would be walking by and they would stop and they'd take a photo or they'd watch. And you can tell a difference, you can in a certain way tell a story that way. Because if people are interacting with it, they help tell the story themselves. They can post about it, they can talk with their friends, they can talk to the media. We had some people who were just passersby that ended up on the news because they were just there and they could sort of give their opinions about what was happening. And so besides the technical details of flat, blank, throw ratio, thinking about where you are can help develop the story that you're trying to tell about the project you're doing. And I think that's a very important aspect of this to take under consideration. So before we go on to lighting, are there any other questions or thoughts about how to find a good location for a projection?
You might be covering this in lighting. This is Teresa. I noticed in your picture of the projection there were street lamps there, and I was wondering how much that affects the location that you choose.
Yeah, it does. I have a specific example about that I think illustrates that really well, which we'll get to, but that's a really important point to think about. Yes. But yeah, we'll jump into that in a moment. Any other thoughts, questions about locations?
Teresa, again, one more on location, permissions and such. I mean, it's different than I know there's gathering space permissions that need to be attained in a lot of cities, but projections being not a permanent thing, is that more loosely governed and regulated?
This is a very important point that I should have included in the training. And so thank you for bringing it up. I actually there really should be a slide about this. So it does vary from place to place is the answer always, because you're really dealing with local jurisdiction. Generally speaking, and I'm so far from a lawyer, it's not even funny. If you are in public space and you are not obstructing traffic of any kind, you are probably fine. Probably. It will be based on the mood of the specific people you're interacting with, and you should take under consideration rules about being outside and quarantine. And the other thing to underline about this sort of at every point is what makes this a useful approach right now is that we can do this in a socially distanced way. So as long as you're approaching this in a way that is socially distanced, you are probably fine. But there's no guarantees, of course. Anytime you're dealing with being on private property, they can ask you to leave. And if you don't, you could get in trouble, is the basic answer. But, you know, for instance, in Texas, in Austin, we had Texas Department of, essentially Texas state troopers drive right by and wave. You know, they were just like, okay, that's fine. And we had, you know, police officers come up to us. It really depends, is basically the answer. But because it's not permanent, if you're not obstructing traffic or sidewalks, you're probably fine.
Thank you.
Aaron, did you have any other thoughts about that?
There's always like the phrase, you know, like ask for forgiveness, not permission. And I think that's kind of where we're leaning here. That said, if you would feel more comfortable like reaching out to something ahead of time and asking for that permission and like sending them a link to the website, there's nothing wrong with doing that due diligence, you know?
Yeah, I agree with that. Thank you for bringing that up. I had completely overlooked that, and it's a really important point.
This is Joe. So you're saying if I'm putting a projection on the side of a hotel, do I need the permission of the hotel to do that?
So our approach, so the first building like that we projected on was it was an AT&T building, and we did not ask their permission for it because we were on a public sidewalk. Actually, we had pulled into a parking space specifically, and we did not ask their permission because we weren't leaving any permanent marks. We weren't doing any damage to their property. That said, also we are going to try and project on a hotel on the 6th, and we are asking for their permission in that instance because of the specifics of the location. It's very hard to be there and be in public space, so we're getting their permission, and they granted it to us. They said okay, and so it's really what you think is appropriate or what you feel comfortable with is really the answer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Not to belabor the point, but probably it's in the interest of some, like a hotel, to have people come by and be near their hotel.
Yeah, and none of this is accusatory, right? We're not saying,
right.
This might be a different case if we were like, Four Seasons Hotel kills, like there would be if we were accusing them of something, right?
Right,
but
that'd be bad.
we're actually sort of inviting them to be part of like a public service and like
and it's almost like a flash mob type of thing. You don't have to get grants for that or permissions necessarily.
Yeah. So why don't we go through and talk a little more about lighting and electricity, the other two L's, and we can see what else pops up for folks as we go, if that's all right. All right. So we're going to talk about lighting. So this is the first projection we did was actually in Washington, D.C. with an artist who specializes in this. None of the projections I've done look this cool. We're on multiple surfaces. This is like the super pro version of it, but the essence of what we're doing is about light. What you see in a projection is reflected light coming off of a surface. And there are two kinds of light that you need to think about. There is light coming out of your projector, and there is light coming from other sources, ambient light. And we're going to go through both of those one by one. So the first question to answer is, how bright is my projector? So brightness is measured in something called lumens. And lumens just measures the amount, essentially like the number of light particles that a given machine can pump out at a given moment. So you want at least 3,000 lumens for your projector to work outside at night. The projector that we've been using here is 3,600 lumens, but if you can get higher, the higher the better, basically. With that 3,600 lumens, we were able to see, when we were close in, we were able to see pretty well at dusk. It didn't have to be totally dark, but when we got a little further away, it had to be very, very dark before our messages and the text could be seen. With about 3,000 lumens, you can be about 30 to 70 feet away from a surface and have it be reasonably visible. So think about, I don't know, my dad was a school bus driver for a long time. And so I think about this in school buses. A school bus, full-size school bus, is about 35 feet. So think about this as being about 1 to 2 school buses away from your surface. The other thing I just wanted to add is that if you're looking for projectors or shopping for projectors, sometimes you'll see this word lux associated with them. And that's a misleading term. Generally, lux is a term that describes the number of light particles that are hitting a surface rather than being emitted by your projector. And that's actually not something that an that is actually a real thing. Lux is basically a made up term that projector companies use to make it seem like their projector is cooler and better than it is. So generally speaking, if you see someone selling you a projector that says it has 8,000 lux or something like that, you should be suspicious. And the last thing I'll just say about light here is you have more flexibility with your brightness and your location based on if your text is simpler. So the what we have prepared for everybody to project, the slideshow, is just white on black text. And it's not even this, this font. It's a very simple sans serif, bold font. And if you have that bold font, you kind of have more forgiveness because it's easier to pick that up. Remember, you're just seeing reflected light. So that hopefully gives you a little more flexibility and ease of managing it. And so the second thing to consider is ambient light, which is light that is coming from other surfaces, from other places, that is hitting your surface that makes it harder to see the light that is coming out of your projector. So this is a picture of the Hyatt Hotel in Austin, Texas. And as you can see, it has these nice big blank sidewalls. And I thought it was a great idea. I drove by there during the day. I was like, oh, we should do our projection there. It's right by the lake. It's like this beautiful, beautiful spot. But then I drove by there at night, and as you can see, there are spotlights on the side where we would want to be projecting, where you can't, if you tried to project on that, you would not be able to see any of the words that you were sending up because it's drowned out by the other light. And so this is just a point, a sort of very elaborated point, dramatic point to make, that your surface needs to have a limited amount of ambient light coming on it. The answer in kind of all scenarios here is, if you have a chance to test it, give it a test. Go out there and like point your projector at it. And that's the best way to answer all these questions. But the more that you can minimize that direct light on your surface, the more effective your message will be. And so, yeah, that's the basic light. You need to think about what's coming out of your projector and what's coming out of other places. Wanted to pause for questions about lighting.
So Duncan, you might be getting to this. I don't own a projector. Can you talk a little bit about how you find somebody who has a projector, or whether they're inexpensive to purchase, or et cetera?
Yeah, so people who I know who are working on projections now, well, maybe Greg, do you want to say where you're pulling on for your projector?
Neighbors and friends.
Yeah.
Neighbors and friends.
The 3,000 lumen projectors are not very uncommon. And so if you know someone who has a projector, even an indoor one, it may be possible that the one they have is bright enough. We're borrowing one from a local nonprofit here in Austin that's done some outside movie nights. There's people who have borrowed them from universities. There's someone who's working on a projection in South Carolina where they are borrowing it from someone who has I think a spouse that works at the university, and the university's not using it right now. So they're pulling on it there. In terms of purchasing one, they are not cheap, but they are not the most expensive item on Amazon. So you can find a 3,000 lumen projector for about $200. So like I said, not cheap. The thing what gives you more options here is that for this purpose, for doing an outside sending a message type projection, you don't need a very high resolution. A lot of projectors that you find online, they'll be like, oh, HD this and 4K that. The projector we're using here is not even any of those. It's an 800 by 600 resolution projector, and it's fine. It doesn't need to be super tight image. It just needs to be bright. And so you can usually find brighter projectors for somewhat less expensive than if they're lower resolution, if that makes sense.
One more miscellaneous question. What font size do you guys typically use? And does it matter the size of your wall space?
It usually, so it will matter. It matters somewhat. That's a somewhat complicated question. And I want to also add that if you're thinking about this, I'm also available, and there's also Robin, who's the artist in DC, is also available to walk through some of the specifics. of like your event if you find a place and you want to talk
Oh,
about
good.
all that, so we can walk through it. But, you know, just to say, generally speaking, we're going to provide a slideshow with all the fonts and everything kind of set, so that
Oh,
we can
awesome.
really just be thinking about image size and location. So hopefully the content will be sort of squared away, I guess.
That's a relief.
Yeah, very happy to offer that. But there are some specifics that we don't have to get into now where you may need to make some adjustments there, but I think that's something that we can dig in one-on-one. Any other questions about fonts, lights, boldness? All right. So we'll go to the third L, electricity. I needed a mnemonic device. What can I say? What is a watt? A watt describes the rate at which energy is consumed. So this is different than a lumen. In the context of a projection and with light, it varies. So a 10-watt LED light that's much more energy efficient would be much brighter than a 10-watt conventional light that has a filament. And so I want to say that just because you need to pay attention to watt as a separate issue than lumens, and it has a very particular meaning. Fortunately, it's actually pretty straightforward to figure out. Devices will tell you what their wattage needs are. You can usually, for your projector, you can usually flip it over and see it written on the bottom. And if not, you can just Google your projector model name and it will come up and the information there. But you need to know what your wattage. And so so our projector that we used in Austin, it's a 260 watt projector. And you need to know that because you need a power source that provides twice the wattage of your projector. And why twice? Because that watt rating is essentially an average at which that rate of energy is consumed. It's an average. And so sometimes there are surges of power like startup where you need to have a power source that can manage that extra energy so that it doesn't break, doesn't throw a fuse and it doesn't shut down your projector. So you need to know your watts. It's usually an easy number to find. And you need a power source that is twice the wattage of your projector. So where do you get your watts? There's what is a watt and there's where is the watt. First thing is grid power, power that comes out of your wall socket. If you have a way to plug your projector into a socket that is attached to the electrical grid, great. You probably actually don't even need to worry about the wattage of your projector at that point. You can just assume you're covered. Most of what's coming out of the wall is gravy. You can sometimes find outlets in surprising places. They're not always turned on and you should always test them. When we went down to do a projection by the governor's mansion, I thought we'd hit the jackpot. There were all these plugs out on the street by these ornamental planters. And I was like, great, here we go. And I plugged in my phone charger and nothing happened. And they were all turned off. So you can find these outside. They are available. You can also project from your house. We've done a few here just in my neighborhood. Projecting at my house here has a very nice, plain, flat, blank garage door. So we use that. We've done some projections here. But if you have grid power, you're gravy. Good. Your second option is a generator. Generators are very consistent. They are noisy and they run on gasoline. So you're going to have to deal with fumes. But they're usually pretty available. Home Depot, pretty much every Home Depot in America has a tool rental center where they will rent you a generator that will have, and their smallest generator that they have is 2,000 watts, which is more than you need for almost any projector you can find. So generator, extremely consistent. They work. They almost, unless they're broken, they won't shut off. And they're usually powerful enough to handle anything you throw at them in this context. Your third option is to find some sort of battery system with an inverter. And so Inverter just means that you can't obviously plug a projector into a car battery or something like that. You need an inverter that will take the kind of energy that's in the battery and convert it to a form that's usable by your projector. Inverters make their power, I'll get you, Aaron. Inverters make their wattage very obvious. They're usually printed in very large numbers across the front of it. So if you're using an inverter in this context, the wattage should make itself very obvious. And again, really try and stick to that double your wattage needs rule. Aaron.
I'm so sorry, sir. I did not want to interrupt your flow. We have one person waiting in the queue, a late join.
Oh, shoot. How do I get them in here? Great. They are admitted. Thank you for the heads up.
Mm-hmm. We have Ali Lieberman, also from Power, joining us, who's coming out of Maryland.
Great. So for the third L, electricity, any questions about that? I think it's in some ways one of the more complicated ones. So I want to make sure we have a chance to talk about it.
So again, because I don't own a projector, this would require a extension cord, probably, depending on where you're placing your projector.
That's right. Yeah, good point. We carry a we have had an extension cord with us at all the events. It's come in very handy, even when we haven't strictly needed it. Just gives you less opportunity to trip over something and knock it down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I would always say bring some duct tape. If you've got to tape something down, use the orange extension cords and bring a power surge protector. And hope it doesn't rain, I guess, right?
Yeah, that's the other thing about electricity is it does not do well in the rain. So definitely take that weather. This is unfortunately a very weather dependent event. So there will be, there may just be rainouts, and we'll sort of take that as it comes. Any other thoughts about electricity? Feeling good?
Yes.
Great. So the last thing I will say is that I've made a worksheet and a checklist for planning and action. And the worksheet is it's sort of like a fill in the blank approach, like, answering all the questions it has all the questions you kind of need to ask in order to plan this well. And then the checklist is literally just a list of everything that you need to do in order to make it possible. And so I'm going to send that to everybody right after this ends. It'll come from the COVID Memorial Gmail, and I'll email that out to everybody so that you can have that as a resource. I'm also going to put this recording on YouTube so that you can watch it again if you'd like, share it with anyone who wants to see it, that kind of thing as well.
Great, thanks so much.
Great. So we have two more things we want to get to. One is, what do you want to do? I guess this is the main question. Do you feel like you can lead an event on the 6th?
I guess I didn't grab that it needed to be on the 6th. Is that hard and fast, or that's just we're hoping for that?
I think it's more of a we're hoping for it. I think that would be the 6th is a day when we're gonna a lot of people are gonna be doing it. I think we have events confirmed in Oakland, Portland, Austin, Miami, Washington D.C. We have someone planning one in Cincinnati, yeah. So we have those at least planned on the 6th. But any other day is very much welcome. If it's before, it'll be extra promotion and get more people excited about it. If it's after, it shows that what we're doing is working and that people are catching on. Any day is 100% welcome. In fact, that was my next question. Can you lead an event for another day?
You thought of everything. The publicity and the, all that package is already kind of thought out as well.
I wouldn't say 100% thought out, but You know,
Guidelines, perhaps?
yes, guidelines are very much laid out. So we're going to be arranging. So another reason to think about the 6th is that we're going to have a live stream that will be on Now This and on Act TV and a couple other Facebook Live platforms. We're also going to be doing some pitching to press. I have a great big list of all the local NPR stations in the country and how to get them excited about a story. There'll be a little more work to kind of coordinate things on that day. But again, not a requirement.
Okay, this may be a stupid question, but are you thinking the 6th of June?
Yes, not a stupid question. That is actually revealing an unclear part of my slide. So
Okay, thanks. Just want to check. That's only days away.
it is very close.
Mm-hmm.
What are other folks thinking?
Well, Duncan, this is Greg. You know, I think this is something I could probably pull together myself relatively easily. But if I think about like the way I'd want it to happen, in terms of picking a space that's not just accessible to me, but really meaningful, and also I think more importantly, like I and the people I know, we're not directly impacted by this, and so I don't think it has to be explicitly a locally focused event, but I feel like if I'm going to organize an event to mourn, I want to at least try to involve people locally who are mourning. And I just don't know anybody who has been impacted, and my community doesn't seem to either. I think the communities that are being more impacted are more lower income service workers in Miami. And so I'm asking organizations where I know people who work with lower income communities, and I just wonder if you have any thoughts about, like, first of all, do you suggest that these events really just be about projection, and maybe I'm overthinking like who's involved, and it should just be like we project something and people who walk by and that's that? Or do you have any thoughts about the prospect of actually involving people who themselves might be mourning in this as a program of some sort?
I think that's a really great thought and a great way to approach it. I think the more depth that you can bring into this, I think the better. So I think that there is a version of this that is very simple, but I think the deeper version of it is more effective and has more meaning. And so, I think there's lots of different ways that people are relating to the crisis. And I think part of what this can offer is a way to build that bridge between people who are directly affected and people who are not yet or aren't feeling it. And so the stronger you can build that bridge with more relationships, I think the better. So, my hope is that we can offer this as a tactic or a tool that is very flexible to build around, and brings people together in lots of different ways.
Okay, can I add something to that?
Yeah, take it.
Two things, Greg. One, side note, you're in Miami, correct?
Yeah.
So I actually have two friends who also work with Power who are interested in doing something in Miami. So I'll be sure to connect with you guys after this. Unfortunately, they couldn't be on the call. But I wanted to reiterate a point that Duncan made. There's the sense that I was getting a little bit from what you were saying was almost like a bit of an imposter syndrome, right? Like I'm not affected, and so therefore, how could I possibly be the person who's hosting this? And I want to do my best to steer you away from that, because, like Duncan mentioned, it takes the entirety of the community to be able to champion that message, right? It can't just be the people who are affected by it who are championing it. It has to be the whole. So again, if you look in your gallery view, I guess you can't right now because we're on a shared screen, but the two other people who joined me from Power are business affairs managers who work with that company. And the thing that I focus on at that company is a veterans initiative. And if we only reached out for help and assistance with the programs that we're running there to the veterans, nothing would get done. Absolutely nothing would get done. It's with the help of citizen soldiers is kind of the term that we've coined, that's even able to happen. And they went through the same thing too. They all had imposter syndrome too at first, and it took some time to like clear them of that, if you will. But I want to make sure that you don't leave this meeting feeling like because you haven't personally lost someone that you don't have like a place here, because you do, brother.
Yeah, I appreciate that, but I also think it's important to try to center the perspectives or the voices of the people who are most impacted. Although what I'm hearing is that the format of this, there might not necessarily be voices. It might just be, images projected, and that's that. Have people been organizing screenings where they, also bring audio and have any speakers? Have any conversation, like any presentations or anything like that? Do you advise against that sort of thing?
Duncan, you're muted, brother.
Sorry. So the challenge there is that it really depends on what is possible with sort of local social distancing dynamics.
Yeah.
Robin in DC didn't tell anybody when it was happening, didn't invite anybody because DC is still under very strict restrictions on like what is possible and advisable. And it varies on, and I think the sort of bottom line here is that this needs to be done in a way that's safe and protects people. And so whatever gathering you think is possible within that, I think the better. So, but that has really been the bottom line. It's just the specific local dynamics are so different from place to place.
Right.
And West, right now, it's a little hard to really get a handle on that.
Right on.
So Duncan, this is Joe. How long is the presentation you're going to share with us, and is it done on a loop so it repeats itself, or what happens?
So what we're going to do is we're actually going to make it into a video. So right now it's sort of a slideshow like this, but we're actually going to download it and make it into a video where you can just press play and have it loop. It should end up being, I can't do the math in my head. It shouldn't be, it's not going to be longer than 20 minutes, basically. I think our goal is to have between 100 and 110 individual stories from people who have lost someone in the presentation. And we'll have it in a video, so you can just have the video, press play, and it will just loop for you. We've had our projections up for about an hour when we've done them in the past, and that was true in DC. So we looped it a couple times, and it's fine. Most people aren't going to sit there and watch for 20 minutes. They'll probably come by for a few minutes, and they're capturing little bits of this. And the stories that we're picking for that are really ones that sort of help underline the social and political dynamics of the crisis. That make it really clear who's being affected, how they're being affected. So it's not necessarily, one person from every state or something like that, but it's trying to be representative of just how people are feeling based on the sentiment and the things that we're seeing online.
Okay, another question. Did you choose June 6th with any thought of it being D-Day?
This was something Aaron brought up also as a veteran, and actually that was an oversight on our part. It was, we had chosen June 6th because we thought it would be near the moment where the US recorded 100,000 deaths, and we thought there would be a moment that people would want to focus attention onto something like this. And also because there was a few events planned for that day already that we felt if we sort of talked about them together would make it feel like a national event and sort of connect it. So that was actually an oversight. And Aaron has some experience working with service members and as a service member, and I think had some specific thoughts about that as a reflection.
Yeah, and also Joe, I appreciate you bringing that point up. And not a lot of people, one, even know what June 6th is, and two, would think to speak about that. I think, like you did, that was the first thing that I brought up as well, and I was at first against it. But the more that I thought about it, one, it's important to know that this isn't meant to be like in competition with that, right? This isn't like an or. This is more of like an and because both of them are deep in memorial, I think that they actually kind of match in the way that they're portrayed. And so And if you are obviously willing to disagree by any means, but for me, the way I ultimately came down to it was that it wasn't like a conflict of interest, or it wasn't in any way disrespectful to that day, because it wasn't like we were talking about with the hotels before. It's not like we're protesting something. It's not like this is some kind of negative message. If anything, this is us coming together and trying to save more lives moving forward. So that's just where I came down to on it.
Thank you for raising that. The last thing I want to just add is that, can you support others to act? If you're walking away from this and saying, okay, maybe I'm not ready to start this myself, but I want to be a part of helping other people take this on, that's an option too. And that's part of, if you want to sort of make that part of your commitment here, there's lots of ways to do that. I think Greg is also talking about the ways to make collaboration with people and sort of help others to act. The last thing I just wanted to add was, oops, why is this blinking? Okay, there we go. There are other ways to do the memorials. Not all COVID memorials have to have projections. Aaron, do you want to talk a bit about the ribbons, or do you want me to take it?
Can I ask a quick logistical question, Duncan, before you do that? I'm Google Street viewing around town right now to think about surfaces. Does the projector have to basically be on level with where it's projecting to, or can they project up relatively well? Like if I'm on a street, oh, that's helpful.
Yeah, here's an image that answers your question.
Yeah, like how well, and do you have a rough sense of how many stories maybe up they can go before they get too skewed?
So the skew, so every projector that you use will have a function on it, a setting called keystone. And that describes essentially the ratio of the width of the projection at the top to the width of the projection at the bottom. And it's meant to handle this sort of dynamic, and it's adjustable. So this image is probably taken, that's probably 20 or 30 feet above me. And what we did is we just tilted the projector up, and then we adjusted the keystone. And it's a very obvious setting. Every projector will make it very clear how to adjust that. And then you just sort of fiddle with that until it looks about square.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions about projections before Aaron introduces the other ways that we're building memorials?
So what's the thing about the ribbons?
All right.
So another way that we marked our location where we were at these different places. The first time it was, like he said, it was right outside the governor's building and right by the Capitol building. And there were 20 trees that lined that street. And so we decided, why not just bring some ribbon out and just tie those ribbons on to kind of give the location that you're at almost in itself a bit of a memorial status, if you will. And so I would say that, like looking at that, like the low end, right? Like a very minimal lift, grab a few ribbons and tie them up very quickly. It's a very easy way to make the space that you are also part of the exhibit, if you will. And I also understand that there are going to be people who want to give back and want to be a part of this, but for whatever reason, they, after reaching through their networks, that part of the exhibit just wasn't possible, right? They couldn't come up with a projector, and I would hate for that to be a reason that made you not get involved. And so I want to just talk through real quick this idea of the white ribbons and hosting a memorial like in your own way. So the thing to think about here, if you're just doing something that's just an installation and not specifically with a projection, you want to think to yourself, like, where are people going to be walking by? Where we could potentially have either some kind of signage there, or we could spark conversation. What we were doing specifically is, mind you, wearing masks and gloves and the whole nine. We were actually handing out some of that white ribbon and encouraging people to hang it, in their front window, or on a street sign outside of their home, or something along those lines. So just thinking to yourself, let's say, whether it is you're looking at Google Earth, or your city really well, or you just go on a drive, one afternoon this weekend, just scoping the city out and saying, where could I make a nice little installation here that could, in a small way, be part of this larger memorial. So it's a little bit of like a lighter lift there. And then another thing I wanted to throw in here too is this idea of like, what if your city is actually under like a strict shelter in place thing? Like, you're not supposed to be out. It's not safe to be out. The rates are high there. One of the things that Duncan said early on was like, this project, as much as it is about commemorating lives, it's about trying to save future lives. And so when we're doing these memorials, we shouldn't be, standing shoulder to shoulder, arm in hand, like leaning back and forth, like in dancing. Like it needs to be, we need to be examples of how we want other people to be acting in their communities. So keep that in mind while you're out there. And then lastly, if you are in one of those places where that is the case, Duncan mentioned the projection that was done in DC. That was actually done from a window. And so if any of you are uniquely situated where there's a window that you can shoot out of that hits a wall, that might be a location for you right there. It really doesn't have to be the best location in the city. There's no like one best spot. It's really just about joining in the movement. And then just some simple things there in the bottom. If none of that's possible for you, tying a ribbon yourself in your window. And then also in the days to come, we're going to be designing some social media shares that you can use. So I'm sure you guys are familiar with, you can change your Facebook profile image and include something about, a cause that you care about. So we'll be designing some of those that you can share with your communities as well. And then lastly, Duncan, if you wouldn't mind changing the slide, something that's kind of cool that just happened today. Company that I work for is called Power Home Remodeling. I don't know if any of you are randomly familiar with us or not, but we do a lot of great things in our community. And I pitched this idea to them a few weeks back, and it actually got denied because they're in this state of restarting a business, and there's so much happening. There was like, we just can't look at that right now. But it has grown so big that I really want to get their involvement. And I actually got like a green light today, which is really exciting. And so we have a design team and an events team who is really going to lean in on thinking of, what could an exhibit look like. And so in the coming days, as this is developing, we'll be sharing some of those ideas with you all. And that way, as you're making your own installation, whatever it is that it looks like, you have some inspiration for that. So just wanted to share that with you all real quick, just in case the projector is something that's like a big, hitch point for you. You have some other options as well.
And I just wanted to leave this up so that people have my personal contact information. I believe most of you got a text message from me already, but if not, that's my phone number. That's my personal email. And I'm available if you want to chat more with Aaron about any of the things that he was talking about. I'm sure he wouldn't mind having more emails as well. I can connect you with him. But I just wanted to thank you all for taking an hour on a Thursday to sit and chat about this and to think about it with us. And just reflect that, this is a really difficult time. It's emotionally draining, even if we're at home or trying to socially distance, and even more so if you don't have that option. And the fact that you're taking the time to think about this and to consider taking this kind of action in your community really says something powerful. So I just wanted to thank you for that, because I think it's extremely meaningful, and I'm grateful for it. So thank you. And that's me. I'll be following up with more with the worksheet and the checklist, and would love to stay connected.
Real quick before anybody hops off, I think Lori and Greg, you were both in the Miami area. I put my email and my phone number in our group chat there. If you would like to connect with a couple of my friends who are also looking to get involved in the Miami area, I'd love to connect you all. And then I believe we also had somebody on here from DC. Yes. Allie Lieberman is in the DC area, and I'm sure she'd be looking to connect with whoever is on here from there.
We'll do some matchmaking.
Catherine, yeah, sounds great.
So I'm definitely interested in connecting with whoever you have here locally. I've done numerous protests in Miami as well as Fort Lauderdale. So I've got a pretty extensive list. My thoughts were Trump Doral initially because we've done so many there, but now considering what you've said tonight, I might think about changing the location and logistics of that. But I'd love to see who you have locally, and we can talk through and get some ideas.
Honestly, I think they're all in the same boat as some of us. They're just citizens who are looking to help. I don't know that they have a whole lot already planned out, but they wanted to be involved, but just couldn't be on the call tonight.
Awesome. That'd be incredible.
Wonderful.
Great. So we have a DC matchmaking. We have some Miami matchmaking. Who was here from Cincinnati? Was that Patty? Patty, I'm going to connect you with my friend Josh, who's up there, who has an 8,000 lumen projector, which is very exciting. So he's really getting going, and I think is very easy to work with and a very nice person. So there's that.
That'd be great. That'd be great. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Duncan, for all your work.
Thank you, Greg.
Thanks, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you so much.
Night.
Take care.